I've been working.
You really have.
Yeah, we did Europe. Went to Europe
Yeah.
and played over there about a month.
Janis Joplin's life was a pattern of self-destruction she couldn't escape. She introduced her lover to heroin. Then, they both bought from the same dealer on her final weekend. She was engaged 3 times, but destroyed every relationship before it could hurt her. At the peak of her fame, she told friends she feared everyone would abandon her. 3 days later, she was dead. The woman who sang about freedom was trapped by demons that followed her from a brutal childhood to a lonely hotel room. Janis Lynn Joplin was born on January 19, 1943, in Port Arthur, Texas. It was a small oil town that valued obedience, religion, and keeping your head down. Her father worked at Texaco as an engineer. Her mother was a registrar at a business school. They were a typical middle-class family living in a place where girls were raised to be quiet. Boys played football, and no one asked too many questions. Music meant hymns or maybe some country. Nobody there could have imagined that the girl they were raising would one day scream her soul into a microphone and become a rock legend. But growing up wasn't easy. At Thomas Jefferson High School, Janis was bullied so badly it left scars that never healed. Her classmates didn't just mock her, they tormented her. One of them, Jimmy Johnson, yes, the same man who would later coach in the NFL, led the cruelty. He and other boys groped her, called her names, made fun of how she looked, and spread lies about who she slept with. They laughed at her in the hallways and treated her like dirt. Years later, in his 1994 book, Johnson even bragged about it. He said, "Janis didn't wear underwear. He wasn't sorry. Not even a little." That pain pushed her away from the popular kids and toward the outcasts, the artists, the ones who didn't fit in either. That's where she finally found a place. It's also where her fire started to burn. Even while being treated like a joke, Janis was always different. She could read before most kids even started school. By the time she was 14, she was writing plays, painting wild images, and reading books that most adults didn't understand. Teachers noticed her. They saw she had talent, but her ideas were too strange, too raw. While the other girls chased cheerleading dreams, Janis was already digging deep into poetry and painting pain. She didn't care about pretty, she wanted real. That kind of honesty scared people in a town that preferred fake smiles and Sunday dresses. Then, one day, she heard the blues. That changed everything. Somewhere in the mid-1950s, still a teenager, Janis heard the voices of Bessie Smith, Leadbelly, and Big Mama Thornton. Their voices cracked and growled and hurt in a way that made her feel seen. Leadbelly hit her like a bolt of lightning. She said it mattered to her. Bessie Smith was the one she worshipped. Years later, Janis said, "She showed me the air and taught me how to fill it." That was it. That was when she knew she had to sing. Not because she wanted to be famous, but because it felt like survival. She found her voice in those records, and in 1969, she told a magazine, "If the blues syndrome is true, I guess it's true about me." The music gave her a way out of the pain. It let her scream without getting laughed at. In 1962, Janis turned 19. She left Port Arthur and went to the University of Texas in Austin. She wanted to be an artist, not a singer yet. She studied painting, but she couldn't hide her voice for long. She sang in dining halls, bars, wherever they'd let her. She even became friends with Kenneth Threadgill, a country singer who owned a converted gas station that hosted live shows. The school newspaper noticed her too. They said she went barefoot, wore jeans to class, and carried her auto harp around like it was part of her. She was different, and once again, they punished her for it. In 1963, some frat boys entered her in the Ugliest Man on Campus contest. They thought it was funny. She laughed it off, but it cut deep, and it was the final push. She packed her things and hitched a ride to San Francisco. She landed in North Beach in January 1963, only 20 years old. The city was alive with beat poets, strange music, and people who didn't fit the mold. It felt like home. She played small gigs, hung around with musicians who would later become legends, and even recorded blues tracks with Jorma Kaukonen before he joined Jefferson Airplane. You can hear those recordings today. They call it the typewriter tape because Jorma's wife was typing in the background while they played. But even with all the freedom, Janis was still carrying the pain of Port Arthur. It followed her into every relationship and every stage. That same year, she met Jay Whitaker. They crossed paths in a gay bar while playing pool. Jay was an amateur musician, black, and a woman. Their relationship was bold, messy, and dangerous, not because of who they were, but because of the time they lived in. In the 1960s, being in a same-sex, interracial relationship was scandalous, especially for someone from Texas. They moved in together. Jay said the radio was always on, and Janis always craved the spotlight. She even took Jay to get professional photos done. But Janis was torn. She wanted a family, a white picket fence, but she also wanted to sing and be free. That confusion, that battle between love and shame, ended up breaking things apart. Jay said Janis destroyed anything good that came her way, and then came the drugs. Janis had been drinking since her teens, but in San Francisco, she turned to harder stuff. Not psychedelics like other hippies. She wasn't chasing visions. She just wanted to forget. First it was speed, then heroin, and then she started injecting meth. By 1965, she weighed 88 pounds. Her friends were scared. One night, they threw a party. Not to celebrate, but to buy her a bus ticket home. And she went. Back in Port Arthur, she looked like a ghost, but her parents took care of her. She stopped using drugs for a while, tried to be normal. She wore business suits, teased her hair, went back to school. She even got engaged to a local guy. Her family wanted to keep her safe, keep her grounded. It almost worked, but Janis was split in two. Texas was safe, but it was killing her spirit. San Francisco was wild, but it was where she came alive. On June 4th, 1966, a single phone call transformed rock music forever when Chet Helms contacted Janis Joplin. He wanted her to come back to San Francisco. He needed a voice for Big Brother and the holding company. He remembered Janis from the time they'd hitchhiked together, back when neither of them had a plan, just guitars and dreams. Now he was managing a band, and he was sure she was the missing piece. He didn't just call and wait. Helms sent another friend, Travis Rivers, to bring her back to California. That same day, she left Austin behind. Her parents thought she was staying in Texas, playing folk songs in local clubs, but she had something else in mind. Weeks later, they got a letter. That's how they found out their daughter had run off to San Francisco. 6 days after she arrived, on June 10th, Janis walked onto the stage at the Avalon Ballroom. This wasn't just any venue. It was right in the heart of the psychedelic scene. She stood in front of a crowd that didn't know her name. The band behind her was loud, experimental, and already had a following. When she walked in, guitarist Sam Andrew thought she looked like someone's mom from Texas. She wasn't dressed like a hippie. She looked out of place. And yet, when she sang, people started paying attention. It wasn't perfect at first. Her soft folk style didn't match their electric sound. The band wasn't sure what to think. Sam later admitted they weren't blown away in the beginning, but Janis didn't back down. She adjusted. She pushed her voice harder. Over the next year, she found something inside herself that the world had never heard before. A mix of blues, soul, and raw power. She didn't just sing. She roared. She growled. She broke every rule and made new ones. By early 1967, she was already making noise. One show stood out. A Hells Angels concert at Golden Gate Park. Janis and Big Brother played alongside the Grateful Dead. The crowd wasn't easy to win over, but they did. That night, the Hells Angels paid Janis $240 to play another gig a few months later. That was huge. These guys were picky about who they supported. They didn't let just anyone into their circle. Janis wasn't just another singer now. She was the real deal. Everything kept building. Her energy on stage was wild. She stomped her feet, closed her eyes, and poured everything into every note. People weren't used to seeing a woman perform like that, especially not in 1967. At the Monterey Pop Festival that June, she sang Ball and Chain and left the entire crowd stunned. It lasted 5 minutes and 45 seconds, but it changed everything. Cass Elliot from the Mamas and the Papas sat in the crowd, her mouth hanging open. She whispered, "Wow," as tears rolled down her face. Janis started that song sitting down, singing gently. But then she exploded. Her voice cracked open something in the air. When she walked off the stage, she didn't just look satisfied, she looked free. That performance got her noticed by Columbia Records and Bob Dylan's manager. And when D.A. Pennebaker released the Monterey Pop documentary, Janis stole the show. She wasn't just a rising star anymore, she had arrived. That weekend, rock music found something it never had before. A woman who could outsing and outfeel everyone around her. She didn't fake it. She didn't hold back. She screamed. She laughed. She begged. Critics said she sang like an exposed nerve, that she was both fragile and fierce. She wore an apricot mini tunic and bell bottoms. albums. She didn't care how she looked. She cared how it felt, and people felt it. Then came the record. August 12th, 1968. That's when Cheap Thrills was released. It hit #1 in just 8 weeks, and then it stayed there. Not for 1 week, not 2, but 8 non-consecutive weeks. By the end of the year, it had sold nearly 1 million copies. It was the top-selling album of 1968, and yet only one song, Ball and Chain, was actually recorded live. The rest had crowd noise added later to make it feel raw. The producer, John Simon, hated how it turned out. He even pulled his name from the credits, but the fans didn't care. They loved it. And then came the song, Piece of My Heart, released in August 1968. It wasn't hers originally. Irma Franklin recorded it first in 1967. It reached #10 on the R&B charts, but Janis took it and made it something else. Her version hit #12 on the Hot 100. It became Big Brother's only top 40 hit. When Irma heard it on the radio, she didn't even recognize her own song. That's how much Janis had transformed it. Billboard called it dynamite. Cashbox said it was explosive. The guitar solos screamed through the speakers, and Janis tore the song open with her voice. It sold over 1 million copies. No other song would define her legacy more until after her death. But at the peak of it all, she walked away. September 1968. Janis was living at the Chelsea Hotel in New York. That's where she told the world she was leaving Big Brother and the holding company. The news shocked everyone. Their album was still #1. Piece of My Heart was still climbing. Everything was going right. But Janis wanted more. She felt boxed in by the band's sound. She wanted to experiment. When Janis walked away from Big Brother in 1968, she didn't slow down. She built something new, something bold. She called it the Cosmic Blues Band. But this wasn't just some group of backup players. She filled it with serious talent. People like Steven Ryder on keys, Snooky Flowers on sax, Sam Andrew on guitar, and Brad Campbell on bass. These weren't just musicians. They were professionals who knew how to play tight and clean. Janis wanted a sound that leaned more into soul and R&B, something like Otis Redding or the Bar-Kays, and this band delivered that. It was funky, it was powerful, and it didn't sound like anything from the psychedelic scene she had just left. Columbia Records still had her under contract, and they pushed hard. She toured non-stop, with the band expanding to 12 people by the end of 1969. It was exciting, but the pressure was brutal. Her first solo album came out on September 11th, 1969. It was called I Got Dem Old Cosmic Blues Again Mama, and it hit hard. Within 2 months, it went gold. That shut down all the critics who said she couldn't make it without Big Brother. She had recorded the album in New York over just 10 days in June. The producer, Gabriel Meckler, even let her live in his house to keep her away from heroin. She was already spending $200 a day on it, but the music cut through. Tracks like Try Just a Little Bit Harder, Cosmic Blues, and To Love Somebody showed her new direction. Cosmic Blues reached #41 on the Billboard charts. Not everyone loved it. Some critics said the band felt off, but it didn't matter. Janis had proven herself. Then came Tampa, November 15th, 1969. She was on stage singing Summertime when the crowd got wild. Over 3,000 people surged toward the front, and police started forcing them back. Janis snapped. She shouted at the cops, cursed them out, and mocked one officer to his face. They let her finish the show, then arrested her in her dressing room. She was booked for using vulgar and indecent language, posted bail an hour later, and walked out in a fur coat with a peace sign in the air. The charges were dropped, but the story stuck. Another wild chapter in the legend. Just 12 days later, on Thanksgiving, Janis showed up at Madison Square Garden for the Rolling Stones concert. She wasn't supposed to be there. She had gone to Bill Graham's holiday dinner and tagged along to the show. Tina Turner was opening. In the middle of her set, she saw Janis on the side and pulled her up on stage. Together, they tore through Land of 1,000 Dances. It was electric. The crowd went nuts. That moment, captured in a photo, would become one of Janis's most iconic nights. She and Tina only performed together that one time. Before all that, on August 15th, she had arrived at Woodstock. She was paid $15,000 to perform the next day. The lineup kept shifting, and her guitarist, Sam Andrew, had just been fired. His replacement, John Till, barely had time to settle in before walking onto the biggest stage in the world. Janis waited for 10 hours before going on. She was high. She was tired, but she still gave the crowd everything. Her voice cracked. She stomped through Can't Turn You Loose, and for a moment, the chaos fell away. But behind the scenes, it was breaking down. The Cosmic Blues Band fell apart soon after. Too many shows, too many arguments, too much pressure. After Woodstock, Janis spiraled. Her heroin use got worse. She She and Peggy Caserta, her sometime lover, were using heavily. At Woodstock, they were holed up in a tent, shooting heroin and drinking. That moment became a snapshot of everything wrong and everything out of control. Pete Townshend saw her perform and later said she wasn't herself. He blamed the booze and heroin, and it didn't stop. By the time she died, her addiction cost her $200 a day. She was trying to outrun something deeper, and heroin helped her forget. Janis wanted love, desperately, but she didn't know how to keep it. She slept around, not just for fun, but to prove something to herself, that she was desirable, that she mattered. She'd start a relationship and tear it down before it could hurt her. She called herself bisexual, but her drive to prove her heterosexuality led her into one-night stands and toxic patterns. Peggy Caserta was one of the few people who stayed close, even as things got worse. They met in 1966, when Janis couldn't afford a pair of jeans, and Peggy gave them to her. Over time, they became lovers. They also became addicts. It was Janis who introduced Peggy to heroin. By 1969, they were shooting up together. On October 2nd, 1970, they both bought heroin from the same dealer. 2 days later, Janis would be dead. She dated a lot of famous men: Jim Morrison, Joe Namath, Chris Christopherson, even maybe Jimi Hendrix. Some say she had brief flings with Robert Plant, Eric Clapton, Leonard Cohen, but none of it lasted. With Christopherson, things felt more real. They were both rising fast in 1969. By July 1970, Janis was engaged again, this time to Seth Morgan, a 21-year-old dealer and wannabe novelist. It was her third engagement. Friends said she seemed happier, but Morgan was flaky. He barely showed up during her recording sessions and was later caught cheating. He was supposed to meet her on October 3rd. He didn't. She died the next day. In early 1970, she scrapped everything and started over. She formed the Full Tilt Boogie Band, pulling in John Till and his Canadian crew. For the first time, it felt right. These musicians got her. She picked them all herself and said proudly, "This is my band. Finally, it's my band." Their first session was on April 4th, 1970. The chemistry was instant. They toured together and joined the Festival Express tour with the Grateful Dead and the band. It was electric, and it gave Janis the control she'd never had. That summer, she began recording Pearl. It would become her masterpiece. She worked with Paul Rothchild, who had produced for The Doors. She picked every song, every musician, every arrangement. She even wrote Move Over herself. She checked into the Landmark Motor Hotel on August 24th and recorded at Sunset Sound. This time, she stayed clean during sessions, only using after the day's work was done. 8 songs were finished. Her voice had new depth. This was the best work she'd ever done. On October 3rd, 1970, she returned to the studio to listen to the instrumental track for Buried Alive in the Blues. The plan was to record the vocals the next day. Just 3 days before, she had finished Mercedes-Benz in a single take. That final day, she was happy about the music, but furious at Seth Morgan. She went out drinking with a bandmate, and in the hotel lobby, she said something strange, that she feared the band might abandon her. The next morning, Janis Joplin missed her recording session. That alone was strange. She was never late. She was always the first one there, even when others showed up hours later. But this time, she didn't show up at all. So John Byrne Cook, her road manager, went to check on her. He went to room 105 at the Landmark Motor Hotel in Hollywood. No answer. He asked the front desk for a key. When he walked in, everything stopped. Janis was lying face down on the floor, lifeless. She had been dead for almost 19 hours. The room didn't look like the end of a rock star. It was quiet, neat, and peaceful in a strange way. Her purse and makeup were placed neatly on the dresser. The bed was untouched. She still had a few coins in one hand, a pack of cigarettes in the other. It looked like she had just come back from the vending machine downstairs. Her sandals were near her body, the same ones with the small hourglass heel. Her Porsche, a 1964 model painted in wild psychedelic colors, was still parked outside. Some people didn't believe the official story. Peggy Caserta, her close friend, and also a heroin user, said something didn't add up. She said when people overdose, they don't walk around. They collapse fast. Janis, on the other hand, had gone to the lobby, bought cigarettes, walked back, and then died. Caserta had used the same heroin batch shortly before and didn't find it unusually strong. She believed Janis may have tripped. Maybe that tiny heel caught in the carpet. Maybe she hit her nose on the nightstand. Maybe she suffocated while high. There were no visible track marks on Janis's arms. That raised more questions. And on top of that, 2 people she cared about, Peggy and her fiancé, Seth Morgan, were both supposed to meet her 2 days before. Neither of them showed up. She had been alone. There was something else, something that it didn't come out right away. The coroner, Thomas Noguchi, revealed in his book years later that someone had removed drug evidence from the room. A friend of Janis had walked in before police arrived. That person thought they were helping by getting rid of the heroin gear, but then changed their mind and returned it later, realizing the autopsy would show it anyway. At first, news reports said no drugs were found, but that turned out to be false. A spoon and syringe with residue were found later. It made people wonder what really happened during those lost hours. Did someone stage the scene to make it look a certain way? 3 months later, on January 11th, 1971, her final album came out. It was called Pearl. That was her nickname, and it became her biggest success. The album hit #1 on the Billboard 200. It stayed there for 9 weeks. It sold more than 4 million copies and went quadruple platinum. Rolling Stone ranked it number 259 on their 500 greatest albums of all time list. Janis never got to see that, but her voice lived on. One song from the album stood out, Me and Bobby McGee. It was released after her death and hit #1 on March 20th, 1971. It stayed there for 2 weeks. Only one other posthumous single had done that before, Otis Redding's Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay. Christopherson wrote Bobby McGee, inspired by a woman named Barbara McKee, but he misheard the last name and wrote McGee instead. Janis changed the lyrics, flipping the character to a man. Her version became iconic. Billboard named it the number 11 song of 1971. It was added to the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2002. Janis's family didn't want a big event. They cremated her on October 7th, just 3 days after she died. Her ashes were scattered from a plane into the Pacific Ocean near Stinson Beach. That wasn't common back then, but it suited her. Her will had one final request. She set aside $2,500 for a party. That was Janis. Even in death, she wanted people to laugh, drink, and celebrate. Stinson Beach was a hippie hangout, and she loved it there. Now, her ashes became part of it forever. Her death wasn't just personal. It marked the end of an era. In just 1 year, the world had seen the Manson murders, the Altamont disaster, the Kent State shooting, and the deaths of Hendrix and Joplin. Janis became a symbol. She was called the darling of the counterculture and a counterculture pinup. She never joined the feminist movement, but many feminists later saw her as a hero. She was raw, honest, emotional, a woman doing things her way in a man's world. Some said she was the closest female version of Bob Dylan. Her career only lasted about 4 years, but her legacy hit hard and fast. In 1979, a movie came out. It was supposed to be about Janis. The original title was Pearl, but her family didn't approve, so they changed it to The Rose. Bette Midler played the lead. The character wasn't named Janis, but the story was clearly based on her. Midler's performance showed a wild, broken singer who overdoses at the peak of her fame. The film's producer was Paul A. Rothchild, the same man who produced Pearl with Janis. That made the whole thing feel even more real. The movie got 4 Oscar nominations. Midler won a Golden Globe and a Grammy. It introduced Janis's story to a whole new generation. On March 15, 1995, Janis was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was the 10th annual ceremony. Melissa Etheridge gave the tribute performance. She lit up the room with power and soul. Janis was honored alongside legends like Led Zeppelin, Neil Young, and Frank Zappa. Later, the Hall of Fame did more. In 2009, they featured her car and other personal items in an exhibition. That little psychedelic Porsche became a piece of history. Rolling Stone has also recognized her many times. In 2008, she ranked number 28 on their list of the 200 greatest singers of all time. But in the 2023 update, her rank dropped to 78. Fans weren't happy. They felt her impact had been overlooked. Some argued her career was short, but her influence was massive. She had only recorded 3 albums, yet she changed everything.